Ciao! So I've been away for a while, and that's because I've started a job in a very special place. I thought I'll bring you with me and see what we can discover and what we're talking about today. Ciao! Yes, you guessed it. I've been in Rome for most of 2022, and I really wanted to immerse myself and have a feeling of the city. But me being me, of course I went back to ancient Rome. And what better way than rewatch the most epic of movies, the Gladiator. War, betrayal, love, it has it all. But before we dive into sandals and togas, let's have a look at the history. Because the story of the Gladiators is set in a very specific time. Our lead man, Maximus Decimus Meridius, is alas totally fantasy. There are blokes with the same or similar name in history, but none was a general that ended up a gladiator. The first real historical figure we meet is Emperor Marcus Aurelius. He's a lovely elderly man and we like him immediately. Contemporary writer Cassius couldn't stop fanboying over him. When he died in 180 AD, he was 50 years old. And as much as I love Richard Harris, I think he was 12 years older than his character. Then we meet the creepy, slimy, megalomaniac villain, Commodus, Marcus Aurelius' son. Our friend Cassius really didn't like him. Despite this very objective contemporary view, the main plot twist of him killing his father to become emperor is complete rubbish. He had already been called Caesar for 14 years and had been co-emperor for 3 years prior Aurelius' death. So he didn't really have a reason to kill Daddy. He also was much younger than the character shown in the movie, as Commodus was only 19 when he succeeded his father at his death. But it's true he was very egocentric and he became more and more so during his reign. He loved to play in the arena. Strangely, he always won, didn't fight any real battles, and died by the hand of trusted friends, then put an officer of his father in his place. At that point, he had ruled Rome for 12 good years. Now to Lucilla, the heroine that survives it all in the movie, but who had quite a different story in real life. First thing to know is that Marcus Aurelius had quite a brood of children, around 14. Only Commodus, Lucilla and other 3 girls survived him though. In the movie we never see any of the other 3 sisters. Wonder what happened to them. Lucilla had been married to the much cried over in the movie Lucius Verus when she probably was not even 15. And he also had the bad grace, maybe the good grace, to die quite soon. Lucius Verus was Marcus Aurelius' co-emperor, which made Lucilla empress. Good political move there, Marcus Aurelius. She remarried, because shockingly she did remarry, Tiberius Claudius Pompeianus Quintianus. What can I say? At the point in history when the Gladiator takes place, Lucilla would have been married to him. And of course that made her not the empress anymore, because she was married to a general who actually became also the advisor of Commodus later in life. But she really loved her title of Augusta, which means queen, so she kind of kept it, even if she shouldn't have. That makes us wonder if maybe she was a tad power hungry, and that is also probably why she tried to kill Commodus. She didn't succeed, and her brother exiled and killed her. So there goes our idea of angelic Lucilla. The other main focus in the movie is to bring back justice to Rome and make it a republic again. Yes, there was a lot of talk about the golden days of the Golden Republic of Rome, but it stayed just talk. Plus, I'm very sorry to say, Roman citizens like Maximus couldn't be simply enslaved and put in the arena as gladiators. Yes, there is talk that he might be a deserter and, blah blah blah, he could have ended up as a slave. Didn't really convince me though. Gladiators were usually prisoners of war, very often soldiers, slaves that didn't end up quite well, but even people that chose being a gladiator as a career choice, maybe because in financial difficulty or because they just wanted to have fame and a place in history, had to be very fit and able to fight. They had to be the best of the best to do what they did. So they were treated accordingly. So not just a random slave took off the street.
Shouldn't be here, I'm a scribe, I write down words.
Now let's jump into the fight and see what Roman warriors of any kind wore during this time. If you couldn't care less about gladiators and soldiers, you can jump to the second part of my video where I just talk about everyday fashion. The great strength of the Roman Empire were of course its soldiers. And the Gladiator begins with a shot of our hero, general of the great army, Maximus. That was the top job you could have in Rome. You had a lot of influence and the control of the army. If you didn't mind kind of fighting everywhere with everyone and always being away from home and away from political power. What would have a Roman soldier have worn? Let's start with the basic of any Roman dress, the tunica. D-shaped and quite wide, it could or could not have sleeves, but if, these were never longer than the elbow. The tunica was always worn above the knee. Longer tunica could and were worn, but it was considered different and a bit of a fashion statement. You have to know that Romans were all about the manly man and showing off his manly body. Think 80s and the short shorts. Anyway, I would say that the tunica is a first good check, as everyone from our hero Maximus to Marcus Aurelius to the soldiers to Commodus is wearing one, and it looks quite correct. Maximus' most striking item is his cuirass, made of leather and straps of metal, with a sort of skirt, also made of leather and silver discs, attached to the bodies to protect his thighs. Everything beautifully decorated. And we find many depicted examples, and they seem all pieces of art. A detail I love is the waist sash that we can see, that was used to kind of keep closed and in place the cuirass, as it was made of two pieces tied on the side. Of course, if you were not an officer, your chest armor would be a much simpler jacket. What we see mostly in the movie is the lorica segmentata, a chest armor made of iron and steel bands tied together over a leather jerkin, which is also found on the famous Trajan column in Rome. Another detail that seems taken from this same column is the presence of what I suppose might be non-Roman auxiliaries in the back. It's a nice touch, as it's very realistic to represent a Roman army as a mix of cultures. But I think they could have gone even a bit further with the Roman soldiers themselves. They could look more diverse than what we see here. They didn't wear a uniform in the sense we know it. Most probably, every soldier would have chosen what was readily available to him. For example, another chest armor we find in the sources is made with scales, the so-called lorica squamata. Another option was the use of pieces of mail armor. That is why I like this image. These guys are a bit different from their comrade. Plus, he's my absolute favorite. The confidence he has. The movie, like the marketing enterprise of the Trajan column, shows us clearly who are the friends, the Roman, and who the foe, the savage Germans. All soldiers were dressed the same, with the same pieces of armor, even if that was not probably the reality of things. The next obvious protection would have been the shin guards. Maximus shows off some huge shiny ones. I couldn't really find any evidence of shin guards on soldiers though, mostly on gladiators. What we have are a lot of images of wonderful sandal and boots, intrinsically Roman, the Caligae. You might probably have heard about Caligula, the crazy emperor. That was not his real name, but a nickname that the troops of his father gave him when he was a little boy and he was staying with them. And he was very cute little soldier boots, Caligula. More popular with officers were the striking-looking coturnos, or basking, half-calf boots, laced up front and decorated with animal pelts. A shame I couldn't find any example in the movie. Plus, my nerdness was a bit appalled when I noticed some spurs worn by Maximus. But you know what? Romans did have spurs. They didn't have stirrups, but they had spurs. That little detail made my day. The next fundamental item in a soldier's closet would have been the cloak. Of course, necessary when traveling to cold climates. It could also have been used as a blanket or a shield wrapped around your arm when needed. It was called sagum, a huge rectangular piece of cloth fastened with a brooch on the shoulder, usually wool. In the movie, every soldier is wearing a red one, because the main theme theory is that red was the color of the Roman army. But I come back to the idea that the soldiers did what they could, so they probably used brown or beige wool as well. Certainly, the general's cloak was red, as he was the main man and he had to be recognizable. Plus, red was the VIP colors for the Roman. If a general came back victorious from a campaign, he even wore a very special cloak called paludamentum, and its color was purpura. Purpura is now translated with purple, but to be honest, we are not really able to recreate this color that comes from a seashell. It's described like a magic color between burgundy and deep purple that shimmers in the light and becomes stronger over time. It was so precious and so expensive that only emperor and family could wear it without restriction. Or you had to be a victorious commander, like Maximus would have been, that coming back to Rome had a parade where he could show off the famous paludamentum and be praised for his victories. Now that you know this, you can notice with a shake of your head that even if Marcus Aurelius and Commodus could have worn a purple cloak, their personal guard, the Praetorians, would have not. Praetorians are an interesting part of the army because they were soldiers, but they had the specific role to defend the emperor, and they usually wore an older fashioned armor and oval shields instead of the rectangular one used by the army. At the beginning we see them carry roundish one, which we have an example of, even if the guard in question seems not wearing a full armor, while at the end they carry the rectangular ones that are definitely wrong. Also, this Gothic twist with a black armor is a bit futuristic. That is a feat left for the wealthy general of the 16th century AD. And I will say it here, but it goes for all the movie. Black was a color for mourning or for very specific ceremonies. It was not a color that a dandy like Commodus is trying to be would have chosen. Coming back to our friend Maximus, a last detail I want to discuss is the wolf pelt over his shoulder, worn over the red cloak, which looks of course very fierce and distinguishing from the less warrior-like Commodus. The other thing that came to mind was that a she-wolf was the symbol of Rome. It is still today. And the fact that Maximus is wearing wolf skins and has a wolf head on his grass makes me think that that is a hint that he is a true prince of Rome, not Commodus. A historical correct and nice detail is that an animal skin was always worn by the standard bearer, as we can see in the film. A detail now that we know is a classic in movies is having the main characters going around without wearing a helmet. Because otherwise, how could you see the deep frown, the concentration when fighting the enemy? But, of course, that was not how things happened. Real officers and even some of the troops, there were removable crests used during parade, used crested helmets to be recognizable and visible during the battle. Maximus and his chief commanders show us only for a brief moment how great they would have looked in the traditional helmet with red horsehair standing straight off the head. before continuing the fight bareheaded. Soldiers would have worn a plain helmet with cheek and chin guards because they were not lunatics. Unfortunately, all the actors in the movie do wear them. Now to the itchy question. Would the Romans have worn pants? Nah, the manly man would have not. It was considered a barbarian thing, and it would have been heavily frowned upon by Roman citizens, the one with a capital C. But as centuries passed by, and Romans entered more and more in contact with the so-called barbarians, of course things changed, and pants started to be worn even in Rome. But to be honest, it took a bit of time, and so we are talking about the 4th century AD, so maybe around 150 years later than what we see in the movie. But these soldiers are campaigning in very cold climate for a very long time. So it's really another point open to discussion if the army or part of the army would have worn these pants. But our friend Quintus, I truly don't think at this point in time he and his comrades would have been running around so covered in Rome. We want knees and elbows showing. What they really, let me say it again, really would have not worn are the vambraces. Let's have a look at the images we have. Do you see any? It's not a fantasy. I know, I ruined this scene. But you know, leather bracelets are for rock stars, not Roman generals. What soldiers might have worn is the manica, a segmented arm protector. We will see them later used by gladiators, but we have many references that also show soldiers wearing them. Another correct detail that we see in the movie, and that is very strictly connected with the Roman army in our imagination, is the rectangular shield. Curved on the top with bolts decorating its leather-covered front, it's a symbol of Roman strength and the effectiveness of its army. We've already seen that Praetorians used different shields, had an oval shape, and by the end of the 4th century they were also commonly used in the Roman army itself. Last but not least, another typical Roman feature is the Gladio. It is a short sword, very handy in close combat. It had a bone or ivory grip with a wooden pommel on top and an oval-shaped handguard. This could be more or less decorated. The blade started around 40-50 centimeters long, but increased with time, reaching 70 centimeters. Also, the very triangular point became less squarish in the years. Maximus is showing off a very posh one, and he rightly goes to fetch it back from the battlefield, because you know, you don't leave expensive swords stuck in poor trees. An interesting detail is that he is wearing his Gladio on the left side, with a scabbard of course. But till the 4th century, only officers like him would have done that. Everybody else would have worn it on the right hand side. Soldiers could also have daggers and a javelin, a spear thrown to the enemy before close combat. We see plenty to make us happy. And here we conclude our summary of armor and weapons of the Roman army. What I would really like that you come away with is that the Roman army itself was quite diverse and not very uniform as we imagine it. The Gladiator shows a good depiction of it, so you can enjoy it, and if you will see statues or any other depiction of Roman soldiers, you will now know a bit more. Who were gladiators? The movie shows us a bunch of slaves, among which there is Maximus, sold to a lanista, this guy, Proximo. A lanista, usually a retired gladiator himself, was the owner of a gladiator school where he trained men to become excellent and I guess very spectacular fighters able to entertain the crowd. We can see that in the movie everybody is treated different based on their ability and their prowess in battle, and that sounds quite fair. What is less so is that they make look the arena like a place where they randomly throw in guys to randomly fight other guys. But it was actually very structured who fought who and how things went. For example, it is a bit shady how they recognize that Maximus is probably a soldier and they just suppose he's a deserter. They recognize him thanks to his tattoo, and I will leap at this opportunity to talk about tattoos in the Roman Empire. Tattoos were usually done to slaves, to kind of make them a thing, a possession, and not a human being anymore. Tattoo was called stigma, a word described thus in the Modern Dictionary of Cambridge. Stigma, a strong feeling of disapproval that most people in a society have about something, especially when this is unfair. Soldiers were the only citizens that were tattooed when they entered the army. That was to create a sense of belonging, but also to be able to recognize them as deserters in case they fled. And that is exactly what happens to Maximus. It is shady though, because the Lannister probably would have to contact someone and say they found a deserter, and probably do a lot of paperwork, maybe pay something to keep him. But of course, then the movie wouldn't happen and the story wouldn't go on, so, you know. But let's go back to my train of thoughts about how things were not randomly done in the arena. There were specific fights done in specific times with specific gladiators. That means that they also had specific armor and weapons for specific gladiators. The first gladiator we can historically recognize is him, the most classical and famous representation of a gladiator. Huge helmet with face protection and a crest called Cassius Christa, a scaled or mail arm protection called manica, a big belt called balteus to sustain his loincloth, and one shin guard on his left leg called ochrea, bare-chested for the rest. We find many references for this kind of fighter, called the murmillo. He should only have a sword, no mace, and a rectangular shield called scutum, that we don't see in the movie. And he probably would have been quite colourful in his choice of loincloth and belt. Difficult to notice a difference in this wheel of blood and fallen limbs, there is another fighter that is almost identical to the murmillo, the Frex. Hope I pronounced it right, but I guess nobody can correct me really. His helmet is also crested, but with the head of a griffin, and he wears both ochrea, both shin protectors. Yeah, I know, not a huge difference, but now we know. About the other gladiators, I must say there seems to be a bit of confusion. We see a net and a trident somewhere. The Retiarius was a gladiator that fought with those. He only had an arm protection with a sort of shoulder guard called galerus, and of course a stylish loincloth or short tunica with a belt. His only other weapon apart from the net and the trident was a small dagger. As we can observe here, he is wearing more protection and a helmet, which is not correct. They seem to have merged the Retiarius with his classical opponent, the secutor, the pursuer. Those two are mostly depicting fighting each other. The secutor would have worn an egg-shaped helmet and would have worn a manica and ochrea. He would also have carried a rectangular shield and a sword. And that is how our favorite villain by now, Commodus, would participate to the game, as a secutor. Other times, when fighting wild beasts or domestic animals, he would appear as the demigod Hercules or the god Mercury himself. You know, for every occasion you need a specific dress. To make this scene epic, I have the impression they really kind of throw a bit of everything in. Like this guy, who looks terrified, but how can he see out of that? And what protection does it give? Plus, imagine the smell. Also, that is quite a strange and to me a bit fantastic looking helmet. There are many more. In the next scene in the arena, we see that they have pushed up Maximus, with a crest and a spiky helmet. Love the detail of the belt, with leather straps and metal plates, often found worn by soldiers. It definitely looks he's making his way up, and for sure in Rome they had higher standards about the shows. We can also recognize the silhouette to be a fancy Frex. What they are preparing here is for Maximus and friends to impersonate the defeated Carthaginian. They are all dressed the same with a bluish tunic, the color of barbarians, with mail, some sort of cuirass and a variety of helmets. We've seen mail before in the Roman army, and also the shields and spears are spot on for the games. For the rest, I would say it looks quite generic. Did I say already it's like a bit of throw it all in? For example, these helmets kind of remind me of Ottoman helmets. Yeah, and the Ottoman Empire was like in the 14th century, and here we are in 180 AD. And I love this very lurexy golden armours worn by the enemy. I mean, they look Roman, but also, I don't know, like they just stepped down from a Dolce & Gabbana catwalk show. Oh well, they die all quickly. And to be honest, the point of the games was to be very spectacular and outlandish. Probably not in the way they show in the movie, but we get the idea. That is why we can also accept the next gladiator we get, the Lion Man. Fitting choice as they add wild animals to the games. We've said anything fancy and spectacular was welcome, so we can appreciate his looks and armor. A mix of details we have seen on other gladiators, with the unique touch of the lion helmet and lion pose on his shoulders. Quite happy till you see the eyelets. Eyelets are a sore eye in historical costuming. Romans did not have eyelets. For the last and final scene, there is nothing really new, as Maximus is in his now standard gladiator outfit once again. But I would like to spend 2 words about Commodus. The real Emperor Commodus was famous to dress himself as Hercules, as we already said. We even have wonderful statues depicting him this way. Hercules was the son of Jupiter and Alcmena, a mortal woman. He is remembered as the strongest of men and was always shown with a lion skin and his favorite weapon, a club. Commodus must have looked dashing. In the movie, Commodus looks like he just stepped down from a pedestal, all in white. I guess it could be realistic, even if to get a really off-white color was quite impossible because there wasn't any white dye at the time. But you know, the armor itself looks quite spot on. The thing that really bothers me again are the vambraces. They will get to me someday. But also that he's so covered. I say it again. Where are the knees? Where are the elbows? Why is his neck covered? I can understand the point they were making in showing him as pure and white as a baby, contrasting with Maximus, who's the real man here. But it's probably not historically very accurate, as they really loved color. With this last crashing fact, I conclude the journey looking into Gladiator's armours. If you would like to see more, and unravel with me meters of toga and brace yourself for modern corset, have a look at part 2 of this series. See you soon! Ciao!